before I came to graduate school, I was a high school English and special education teacher, and I was not out at all. I felt that would threaten my job. My student teaching placement was in a rural high school in Indiana, and then I later taught at a different high school. But given the lack of job protections for LGBTQ people in many parts of Indiana, I didn't feel comfortable being out. Looking back, I taught special education in an inner city, and I was a good teacher. They probably realistically weren't going to fire me, but I didn't feel safe at that point. So I very much concentrated on being a teacher and working with my students and really being present with them. And many of my students were working through a sense of what is my sexual orientation, what does it mean to be gay or lesbian or transgender as a high school student. And for me that caused a lot of tension, because I want to be as much of a role model and a mentor as I can for students, but I felt that was an area of my life that it wasn't safe to do so. And looking back, that's something I kind of regret. I want as much as possible for my students to know me for who I am. Here at Purdue, I am able to be very open about my sexual orientation. I don't necessarily announce it in the classroom. I don't put it in the syllabus, but it is definitely a visible part of who I am. I wear a pride bracelet. I often am carrying around books about queer theory or gay and lesbian history. If students inquire, I don't hide it. And here at Purdue, I can do that for several reasons. The first is that Purdue does have, Purdue does prevent discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation when it comes to employment, which is a big reason that I chose, or one of the reasons that I chose Purdue as a place to do graduate work. If I was going to stay in Indiana, I knew that I needed that kind of protection. And the second reason is that I've actually found community here of other gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgender people. So I'm not as isolated as I was in other parts of my life. Now I feel like I don't have to choose between being a teacher and being an out lesbian woman. I can fully be both. One of the more complicated places that I have chosen to be out is at my church. Overall, I feel very welcome at my church. I know that I'm welcome as a gay person, but it was a very strange experience to get there. I remember being very upset when Indiana's Religious Freedom Act happened about 1.5 years ago. And I had gone to church one night right after it had passed, and was feeling a lot of strain and pressure and stress about this, and about what's going to happen here in Indiana. Am I safe here? Can I buy a sandwich if I'm wearing my pride bracelet, kind of stuff. And I had a conversation with some of the religious leaders at my church who didn't quite get that was a problem. And I also remember telling one of the newer leaders at my church that I was lesbian, and he launched into a conversation about gender roles and relationships, and how one person in the relationship, in a lesbian relationship, had to be the man. And I just remember being very puzzled and thinking, this is very strange. So when I have come out in places that are not necessarily used to having lots of queer people in them, sometimes the reactions are very strange. I've been lucky that, no one told me to leave. No one told me, we don't want you here. It was more of a sense of, we're just not really sure how to react to this. And I think that's really one of the big purposes of coming out, of being an active and vocal advocate for inclusion and diversity on campus, is being able to say, when someone presents this particular kind of an identity, here are the ways that are appropriate and helpful and welcoming to react. Explaining to a gay person what you think their relationship should be like is generally not a particularly helpful response. And so often I think the process of being a visible, diverse person at Purdue is kind of a process of educating. And hopefully at some point the educating just stops, and at that point you have an inclusive community.